My name is Ricky Reslavian, and I will stop at nothing to teach the world about itself. Hold on to your seats, because the Emperor is here. Hello, I'm just out here taking a walk in the woods, just trying to clear my mind. Sometimes, it's best to come out here and reflect on life and what's going on. But as we sit here along this beautiful river, my mind goes to two other beautiful places in ancient Greece, Sparta and Athens. Let's head back to the studio real quick and talk about our place of honor for today. I would like to honor olive oil, the product that made Athens and Greece rich as traded around the Aegean. If you remember last time we talked, we focused in on the end of the Dark Age and how around Greece people started to organize into new cities, and we had powerful nobles creating these towns which were called city-states. And in Greece, each city-state was known as a polis, which is just a Greek word for a tiny independent country that was its own city. And most Greek city-states had a few things in common. They had a place where there was a marketplace that was an open place where on certain days of the week people would come and bring their goods, but it was also a place to hang out, to discuss the latest and greatest ideas, to catch up on the latest gossip, the political news of the day, to find out what was going on. That was called the agora. Also, a lot of towns, particularly Athens, had a place known as the Acropolis, which was the fortified area on top of a hill, and this was a place where they could go in times of trouble, and also a place where they would build their temples and altars to worship their gods. And so in these polises around ancient Greece, we start to have the idea of citizenship develop. And as a citizen of these towns, you were seen as an equal. You were part of a community as an equal. But in ancient Greece, citizenship was pretty limited. It wasn't like today, where citizenship is open to a lot of people. In ancient Greece, you had to be a man, you had to be free, you had to be born in that city, and you had to own land. They thought, hey, if you were born in the city, you own land, you have a stake in it, you should have the ability to control how things work. Now, as a citizen, you had certain rights and responsibilities. As a citizen in ancient Greece, generally you had the right to vote, hold office, own property, and be defended in court. But that came with a responsibility. It wasn't just handed out for free. And in order to get those rights, you had the responsibility to serve your city in the military and the government. And one common theme we'll see around ancient Greek cities is these citizen soldiers, these regular ordinary men who in time of crisis would put down their regular day job tools and become a soldier to defend their city. We call these soldiers hoplites. Each soldier carries a round shield, usually some kind of spear, and a short sword. And the strength of these armies was how the soldiers would lock together closely to protect one another. So if we think about their strengths, it has to do with how they march together as a tight protective unit. And you can see here their shields would have protected them as they marched together. And they're going to be especially motivated to fight for their hometown, and they're going to be united because they're fighting alongside people they grew up with. They're fighting for their city. That is going to motivate them. But later in our unit on Greece, we're going to see how these hometown loyalties also caused division. Greece was not united as a whole, and so these same loyalties that united also were loyalties that divided Greece, and it was not an entire place that was unified. So let's jump back into this Dark Age. And if we remember, each of these polises were ruled by a king or some kind of wealthy noble. And the people living in the town would have paid taxes to them in the form of crops. But eventually these farmers were, tired of being ruled by a king. Many of them found themselves in debt because they owed money to these nobles. And many of them even found themselves in debt slavery because they could not pay their loans. And so they were tired of this, and so they rose up with the support of the hoplites, with the support of the army, and they put in power somebody that they wanted to see in power. And they called this person a tyrant. Now, these tyrants, they liked them, because they got rid of the kings and the tyrants gave the people what they wanted, right? So they were tired of doing the old thing, they were tired of living in their old way of life, so they rose up and they put tyrants in power. So tyrants became popular in ancient Greece because they gave the people what they wanted, and much of what the people wanted at the time were things that would have made them happy. Things like marketplaces, temples, and city walls. But like any gift, any material thing, it only makes people temporarily happy. It doesn't solve the people's problems over the long term. And so we're going to focus in today here on Athens, one of these Greek city-states, which was starting to go through a period of being ruled by tyrants. We're going to meet 4 people today that helped shape Athens and create it and make it into one of the best democracies and the world's first democracy. And so the first person is Mr. S, or Solon. Then we have Pisistratus, or Mr. P. We have Cleisthenes, or Dr. C. And our 4th member is Pericles, or Captain Democracy. And these 4 people collectively, I would like to refer to as Athens' Fantastic Four, because each of them helped shape and build the democracy that was growing in Athens. So let's talk about this guy, Solon. Solon was a tyrant who was put in power, and he established order. He wanted to reach out to the poor farmers, so he canceled their debts. In doing this, he also freed a lot of slaves because people were in debt slavery. And one of the things that was in Athens was an assembly, which is where people could gather and participate in the government. And he allowed all male citizens to vote in the assembly. That's Mr. S. Let's keep moving to Pisistratus. About 30 years later, Pisistratus comes to power, and he's another tyrant put in power to establish order. And he reaches out and tries to reach out to the common man, to take power away from the aristocrats. He wants to help them out. He wants to help out the common man. So he gives land, he divides it up from the rich nobles, and he gives it to poor farmers. And he also loans money to the poor. One way he's also going to boost the economy is he's going to create jobs by starting construction projects, building public works, things like temples, things that are going to make people have a job for many years. That's Pisistratus. Now we have Cleisthenes. Cleisthenes is really important because it's the changes that he does that really makes Athens into a democracy. He gives more powers to the assembly. He lets all male citizens belong to it and vote. People are able to debate matters openly. And the key here is he creates a new council of 500 members. And this council was selected by lottery, meaning anyone, regardless of your status, could potentially be in this council. And it's because of this that we say he is credited with making Athens a democracy. Later, we'll focus on Captain Democracy himself, or Pericles, who led Athens during its golden age. We're going to spend a lot more time talking about him later. But just some quick facts about him. He leads Athens during its golden age. He's a former Athenian general, and he really expands the government access to the regular people. All right, so all of these things help Athens to create a democracy. So Athens is seen as the birthplace of democracy, or the birthplace of a government in which people have input, in which people have a voice. We're going to see the hallmark of democracy is regular people getting to have a voice in the government. In fact, democracy means people power. In the Greek, it comes from the words demos and the word kratos, which literally is translated as people power. Pretty cool. So with Athens' democracy, we're going to see a city develop, a culture develop that's focused on the whole person. It's focused on learning, it's focused on growth, a culture that's focused on art, and we're going to see literature and architecture and really just an advanced culture develop in Athens. And so because they wanted this kind of culture, we're going to see that boys were educated in what we would just consider a well-rounded education, meaning they're going to get educated in many subjects, including reading, writing, math, science. They're going to learn to exercise, they're going to learn music, they're going to learn to play this thing called a lyre, they're going to learn to write. Girls, on the other hand, are not receiving this education. They're focusing on tasks at home, learning to take care of children at home. 2 really important tasks that women did in ancient Greece was the spinning and weaving of cloth. This is going to be how the Athenians and other Greeks are going to get their clothes. If you were wealthy, some girls did receive an education, but this would have perhaps been very, very rare. So this democracy that we're looking at is completely different than an oligarchy on the other hand. So we're going to see that Sparta has an oligarchy and Athens has a democracy. So let's move a little bit to the south in Greece and focus in on Sparta. Sparta's kind of an interesting place. You see, it was founded by the Dorians, the people from last video, and immediately it became a society that was based on warfare. They conquered their neighbors and enslaved them. And so because of this, we're going to see a culture develop on physical strength and dominance and just the strength of the military. And the reason this society developed is because they had to be that way because of how many people they had enslaved. There was 10 times as many slaves in Sparta as there were male citizens. And the work, every single part of their economy, the work was done by helots or Spartan slaves. And there was thousands of these guys, and the Spartans had to make sure these people couldn't run away, that they couldn't desert, or worst of all, they had to make sure that they couldn't get an idea like, hey, we're going to rebel and take people out. And so, in response, Sparta pours all its energy into having the strongest army around so that they could prevent slave revolts. Because that would be the worst thing that could happen to them. They were so afraid of slave revolts that they dedicated their entire city to having the best army to defend against that. Now, Sparta also has an oligarchy. An oligarchy is a government where a small group of people hold the power. Now, Sparta's oligarchy is actually pretty complicated. They have two kings. There's a council of elders of men over 60 who are wise, who have served in the army in Sparta for their entire careers. And then they have an assembly, which is made up of any men over 30. And they do have some people doing some basic, logistical, bureaucratic type work. These people are known as ephors. They enforce laws and collect taxes. Now, Sparta was such a unique system that's so focused on perpetuating the army and perpetuating their one way of life, tries to keep a lock on knowledge in their society. So they banned foreign visitors and they banned travel abroad. Sparta did not trade with other Greek city-states. In fact, their economy is going to suffer because of this. They're so focused on the army that they lose out on a lot of other aspects of society. In order to make sure that their boys were the toughest and were going to become the strongest warriors, they left their family at age 7 to train for the military. And they went and they lived with other boys to train, and they lived in barracks. They did this for 13 years. 13 years of grueling training where they'd be beaten, where they would be starved, where they'd be encouraged to steal, and then beaten if they were caught stealing. They slept on the ground. They were organized into flocks and herds, almost treated like animals, to ensure that they would become the toughest soldiers that could withstand any conditions in war. And so by the age of 20, they were officially in the regular army, and it wasn't until they were 30 that they could come back and start a family. If you made it to 60, you could finally be done serving in the army. Girls in Sparta were also expected to be the pinnacle of physical fitness, and so they trained in athletics, wrestling and running, throwing the javelin. And the reason this was is because they wanted Spartan girls to turn into healthy Spartan mothers, to have healthy Spartan babies, because that was the way to perpetuate Sparta. The interesting thing here is that women in Sparta were actually very free for the Greek society. They could own property, they could travel where they wanted, and part of the reason this was is because the men were so often gone fighting that women had more control in the town. And so we can see two city-states, Athens and Sparta. One is completely different than the other. One is focused on military strength and physical fitness, while Athens is focused on learning and growth, and the emphasis on the whole person, the whole well-rounded person. Although they were very different, it's important to remember that they do still share cultural elements. They would have shared similar religious beliefs, they would have shared the belief and an understanding of the myths of Homer, and they also would have shared the Greek language. So thanks for joining me out here on my walk. Thanks for coming with me on this educational mission of discovery. And I can't wait to talk to you next time as we learn about a war coming up with a greater outside power, a new threat to Greece known as Persia.